Welcome everyone. By now, we are all Zoom experts. But real briefly, just remember questions can be entered in the Q&A function or in the chat function, either way, and we will entertain those and read them aloud at the end of the presentation. We're glad you're here. Without further ado, Dr. Burns.
Hello, everybody. It's great to have you all with us tonight in our first program in a series of programs addressing medical cannabis. I hope you're all continuing to stay safe, and I'm sure you're as encouraged as I am that our case numbers, hospitalization rates, and death rates due to COVID are trending down in the area. Hopefully that's a sign that we can have some normalcy in our lives very soon. Before we get to the speaker for this evening, I have some special announcements. I'd like to remind you of some upcoming deadlines and events. First, the Academy's Legislative Committee invites you to share your legislative ideas with us. Do you have an idea that can advance the healthcare in Virginia? Or are you facing an issue that affects the practice of medicine? If so, please submit your legislative recommendations to RAM for consideration by the Legislative Committee and possible inclusion in MSV's 2022 legislative agenda. Your ideas are due by next Wednesday, May 19th. Reach out to Laura for more information. We will host our second medical cannabis program on Wednesday, June 16th. And during this presentation, Rebecca Gwilt, partner with Nixon Gwilt Law, will review the legal and practical issues of how to recommend medical cannabis to a patient and then outline how to refer that patient to a dispensary. And for the final program in this series, members will be invited to take a tour of gleaf, our local dispensary, on Wednesday, July 21st. More details will be coming out soon, but there is a limited number of tour slots available. So if you're interested, be sure to sign up early when the notice comes out. Also, some fun activities to look forward to. Take your family out to the ball game on August 21st for a picnic, baseball game with the flying squirrels, and fireworks at the conclusion of the game. More details are coming. We're looking very forward to finally premiering our 200th anniversary video on September 21st at the Jefferson Hotel. Come learn about the Academy's incredible history and why the patient's advocate, the physician's ally, and the community's partner isn't just a catchy tagline. And let's not forget our 200th anniversary celebration gala planned for Saturday, November 13th. Please keep a lookout for a member survey about the gala that you will be seeing soon. And finally, our member favorite family events. We will have the annual fall family event at Lloyd Family Farms on Sunday, October 10th from 2 to 5 p.m. and the popular family night at Lewis Ginter's Botanical Garden Fest of Lights on Sunday, December 5th from 5 to 8. There's one last item that I wanted you all to be aware of. As you all know, Bon Secours Mercy hospitals are attempting to get all of their hospital systems in line, and recently announced that they were going to be changing the hospital bylaws at all of the hospitals so that they were basically the same across the system in their 7 states. So RAM was contacted by one of the leaders at a Bon Secours hospital to see if he could get some help with dealing with this bylaw issue. As many of you know, that's something RAM has done in the past for physicians when bylaw changes have been proposed by hospital systems. So we contacted Libby Snelson, and she has been involved in some of the meetings, but she has issued sort of a warning that I wanted to share with those of you who work for or at a Bon Secours Mercy hospital system here in Richmond. And this is in her words, and I'm just going to read you a little bit of this. The bylaws are a threat The structure they are proposing is a classic hospital takeover, leaving most decisions, including who is on what, if any, committees, to the Medical Executive Committee and the board. The MEC can then be packed with hospital employees or contractors. The major issue is that the design is to move key processes such as credentialing, hearing and appeals, committee designation, and code of conduct to separate policies that are created and put in place without medical staff action, being voted on only by the Medical Executive Committee and the board. She further states, this is a major threat to every medical staff, and that is whether the hospital is governed by a local hospital board or the single system-wide board. The system-wide board could reject any individual medical staff's amendments to their bylaws or attempts to tailor policies to each medical staff. The other thing she made note of is that the group in Richmond was the only group that had any attorney available advocating for the physicians. So if this is of interest and concern to you, I would ask you to reach out to Jim, who can provide you with more details about that. And finally, thanks to a recent promotion that was done by Chick-fil-A a few weeks ago, they raised almost $20,000, which is now donated for Loving Lunches, RVA. So we are going to resume some free lunches to healthcare workers this summer as a result. And finally, if we can be of any further help to you and advocate in any way for you, please let us know. So now for tonight's presentation. Don't forget that CME is available. Please be sure to follow the instructions to receive the credit, which were included in your meeting confirmation email, and which will also be found in the follow-up email you'll receive from tonight's presentation. I'd also like to remind everyone that the presentation will be recorded and a link to view the presentation will go out in tomorrow's Leg Up. But don't be shy asking questions this evening. Use the chat feature and Jim or I will read the questions to Dr. Kerr at the end. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Helen Kerr is a PharmD and has spent over 20 years working in a hospital setting as a clinical pharmacist. She's board certified in geriatric pharmacy and a clinical anticoagulation specialist. Dr. Kerr has been an adjunct professor at both the University of West Virginia and the University of Colorado. She has supervised and mentored many pharmacy students and interns in their clinical rotations. Dr. Kerr was on the ground floor of medical cannabis when first introduced in Maryland. She's the clinical director of gleaf of Maryland, where she counsels patients who are new to cannabis, guiding them through the beginning of their treatment. As clinical director, Dr. Kerr also provides education to the dispensary agents, as well as teaches on the subject at Frederick Community College and local community organizations. Dr. Kerr feels her years working with patients in the hospital made her the perfect fit for the burgeoning field of medical cannabis, using her background in pharmaceuticals to customize treatment, specializing in the elderly. Welcome, Dr. Kerr.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Now we just need to figure out to share my screen. All right, are we good?
We are good.
Okay, so
Yes, ma'am.
All right, hello everybody. I wish I could see your faces, but I can't. I'm Helen Kerr. I work for gleaf. Just thank you so much for the introduction. Today, right? Okay. We already talked about me. In addition to that, I am also a healthcare policy analyst for Delegate Helen Kerr for the state of Maryland. So we get a little input into the laws for cannabis in the state of Maryland. Today, my objectives are going to be the big picture. When I first started with cannabis, I didn't really have the puzzle for how to really treat the patients. And so this is what I want to give you today, that I realize not all of you are going to participate in cannabis care with your patients, but for those of you who want to, at the end of this, you're going to have a little roadmap. You're going to have a puzzle for how to get up and running. And I'm going to give you some practical dosing guidelines and some references that I particularly like. I'm not going to repeat the things that Dr. Castrat said because it's, we have to keep moving. Unfortunately, some of the things will get repeated. For example, I want to reiterate the species. We divide the species of cannabis into sativa and indica. And the Q is, think of sativa, starts with S, S for sunshine, sunshines during the day. This is the part of the plant, and you can see in your pictures, that's the tall plant with the long, pretty leaves. Think of that as the head as opposed to the body. It's stimulating, gives you focus and creativity. It's uplifting. This is something an artist might really like, a sluggish person might really like, too much of which can cause anxiety. On the other end of the spectrum is indica. The joke is indicouch. That's the body. It's sedating and relaxing and calming. It helps you if you've got muscle spasms. It helps induce sleep. It's the end of the day. Binge watch something on television. Take the day off of you. Species. A lot of this now is academic because the cultivators can do anything they want to with this plant. And mostly we sell a lot of hybrids. So a hybrid in its strictest form is going to be half sativa, half indica. But what we find is, and this is a puzzle piece, is that if we have somebody who by nature is a bit of a nervous wreck, they're just always, since they were kids, they're just sort of always a little anxious. Those people lean towards a hybrid with an indica leaning. If you have somebody who is what we used to call melancholy, they're just a little sluggish all the time, those people lean towards a sativa leaning hybrid because our patients, for the most part, self-medicate to what they consider a balanced feeling. While the endocannabinoid system is completely intricately related to everything we're going to talk about today, Dr. Castrat has already talked about it. So I'm not going to talk about the endocannabinoids. Instead, I want to talk to you about the phytocannabinoids, the ones that come from the plant, from the trichomes of the plant. Here's a cartoon of the plant. This is the trichomes, and this is where the magic is made. The trichomes are what produce the cannabinoids and the terpenes, and we're going to talk about both of them. The phytocannabinoids, the two big famous ones, of course, are THC and CBD. These are proposed things we treat. This is a theory. But when you combine THC with CBD, especially in a one-to-one relationship, that's a good pain recipe. They both decrease nausea and vomiting. We have good evidence for that. THC also works for muscle spasms and stimulating appetite, aiding in sleep, decreasing depression, and tolerance can occur. And THC produces the famous euphoria in the CB1 receptor in the brain. Now, CBD, which is sort of the workhorse of the medicinal side of cannabis, relieves pain, nausea, vomiting, and decreases inflammation and helps to moderate blood sugar because the endocannabinoid system is about homeostasis and the CBD augments the endocannabinoid system. Decreases seizures, anti-proliferative, psoriasis, but think the big picture of autoimmune, antispasmodic, anxiety, neuroprotective, and it reduces a THC-induced euphoria. So if you have a recreational user who's just chasing a THC level, they don't want anything to do with CBD. But when we get medicinal patients, CBD is a very important part of the phytocannabinoids, and it is also completely non-intoxicating. Again, theory. I want to impress that we really don't have sufficient, although we're going to cover what we do have for trials. It's not, I still want to impress that not everything I say is hardcore proven. A lot of anecdotal information. EEG is becoming very popular. Think of G as gut. It's getting a lot of play for inflammatory bowel processes, Crohn's disease, the nausea and vomiting. If you have a big for anti-inflammatory, these are big puzzle pieces for what's wrong with your patient. What are you going to use to treat them? With the bowel inflammation, we know from anecdotal users, patients will come in and say, yeah, my belly really hurts. What have you got with a lot of CBG? They just know. They have in their air quote medicine cabinet, just like we have Tylenol, we have Benadryl, they have species with CBG, species with CBN. They've already figured this out in the dispensary. CBN is very popular. Think of N as night-night. This is what helps people with sleep. It's a breakdown product of THC. So if you've got a flower product sitting in your linen closet for a year and a half, and you pull it out, it's already degraded into CBN, and that's going to be what people save in their medicine cabinet for sleep. The THCA and the CBDA, we don't hear much about that. When you walk and pluck a flower right off of a raw plant, that's what you've got. You've got the acid form of the phytocannabinoid. And through heat and time, they decarboxylate and lose the acid and become THC and CBD, respectively. These have no euphoria. They are known for anti-inflammatory processes, and the CBDA seems to be matching up to a COX-2. Wouldn't that be nice? A COX-2 without the heart problems. So right now in California, they use that a lot. We don't. I really don't see a lot of people using the raw plant, but you can grind it up and you can eat it, which is going to taste a lot like chlorophyll, or you can put it in capsules and eat it, but it's in certain geographical areas, it's pretty popular. Now, when we have these cannabinoids, the plant is in and of itself the natural wonder. So we don't want to separate out all the pieces. We don't want to centrifuge out all the pieces and take one little piece of something and then put it in a sugar cube or a tea or a tincture, because it's not working together with their cousins in this entourage effect. So a full spectrum product includes THC and the cousins. Broad spectrum, you don't need the THC, although it would be nice if you at least had the less than 0.3%, which is what we have in hemp. And then you have the isolate. And this is an important piece of the puzzle, because the isolate, which is what we've had an overabundance of up to this point, just doesn't work as well. Now, here is a chart that you can just get 100 of these. This is off of leafly.com, which is a really nice, it's a lay person's website that's got really nice visuals. And you can see across the top has got the cannabinoids, and then you go down to their proposed mechanisms on the side. I want you to look at the CBD, how it's got all the blue dots. That's the workhorse of the medicinal cannabis. And second from the bottom, reduces contractions in the small intestine. File that away, because we're going to revisit that later in the presentation. I want to touch on talking about what I just talked about between the totality of the plant and an isolate. I want to match that up to pharmaceutical cannabis products that we've had available for a long time and compare them. We have Marinol going down Sativex. Marinol has been around dronabinol since 1985. It used to be a Schedule II. There was just no abuse potential. They moved it to a 3. It is not a whole plant extract. It is a synthetic THC. And it's been used for nausea and vomiting in patients undergoing cancer treatment, an appetite stimulant, and neuropathic pain in MS. Compared to Sativex, which has not been legal in the United States, which is a mouth spray from the whole plant extract. I think it became available in 2011, mostly in Europe. It's a 1-to-1 relationship with the THC and the CBD. And remember, I said when you put those together, that's your pain recipe. So this is a mixture extracted from the sativa plant. And the potential is that it has synthetic cannabinoids and terpenes for the overall effect. And this is being studied a lot by Dr. Ethan Rousseau, and he's a big name in the world of cannabis, and it's not approved in the United States. And this has been used for neuropathic pain in MS and pain in cancer. A lot of information on both of those products, and that's a lot of the information that we use when we decide what indications of therapy we would include. Like I say, it's a mouth spray. It's approximately 2.5 milligrams each of THC and CBD. You spray it in your mouth, and it's a nice low dose that you can use several times a day. So my take-home point is this is not apples to apples. Isolates versus full spectrum or broad spectrum are different products. In this entourage effect are terpenes. Well, what's a terpene? Well, terpenes are everywhere in nature. They're just this large, diverse class of essential oils, and that's what makes cannabis have its special flavor and aroma. The joke is the nose knows. An experienced user can smell a cannabis product and tell you what the terpenes are. Over 20,000 have been described in nature and 200 in cannabis. And terpenes are just how nature evolves to protect the plant, and we take advantage of that. So it's a defense mechanism against insects and bacteria and fungus, attracts pollinators, rejects predators. It is biologically active, interacting with the human physiology. Anecdotally, the terpenes are more effective with an inhalant than they are with an ingested product. And they are also part of this synergistic entourage effect. We have the terpenes and the cannabinoids all working together. And they're made, again, in the magic trichomes. I want to cover, just because we've all heard of these, lavender is a terpene. Turmeric, which you can't turn around now without somebody talking to you about turmeric, that's a terpene, and they're using that for inflammation. I want to hit the big ones because those are the puzzle pieces. Myrcene is the most abundant terpene in cannabis. You can also find it in mangoes. It's primarily sedating, anti-anxiety, and part of the pain formula for inflammation. If a plant has greater than 0.5% myrcene, then we consider that indica leaning. The potential effects, here's the synergy. Here's the entourage effect with CBD for anti-inflammation and with CBG for anti-inflammation. Contrast that with limonene. This is found in citrus fruits. This is, instead of relaxing and sedating, this is energizing. It's good for, this is what we look for depression. It's energizing, it elevates your mood. It's supposed to help with GERD. I have not had much anecdotal information on that. But what we like to see is a good balance between the limonene and the myrcene. One's relaxing and one's energizing. Now, like I said with sativa and indica, the balance is patient specific. Do you have a nervous patient that the balance is going to be higher on myrcene? Do you have a melancholy patient where the balance is going to be higher on limonene? Those patients will self-medicate to their own balance using those two together. Linalool is something that for anxiety, throw that into the mix for insomnia. It has anti-inflammatory properties, but that's not mostly what I consider using it for. That's also a good puzzle piece. Pinene is the earth's most common terpene. Your pine trees outside, that smell you get, that's pinene. Pinene, interestingly enough, although these are inhalants, helps with bronchodilation and memory retention. Now, this is good if you have a patient who's losing their keys, but what if you have a patient that suffers pretty badly from PTSD? So I always encourage them to keep a journal, and if whatever that bad memory is just keeps coming back and back, flooding back, check their pinene level, especially if they're big users. And since THC does have a problem with memory, it is said to decrease the THC-induced memory issues. Beta-caryophyllene is my favorite. This is for anti-inflammation and GI relief, but mostly I think of this as pain and anti-inflammatory. And it doesn't have any of those other effects like sedation and sleep and excitement. It just, because I think it almost can be recategorized as a cannabinoid because of its activation with the CB2 receptors. And it's synergistic with CBD, the anti-inflammatory effect. And interestingly enough, it's from black pepper. And if you have a patient that takes too much cannabis and wants to pull themselves out of a THC-induced high, if you crunch down on black peppercorns, it is said to pull you out. I have no proof on that, just a lot of anecdotal information. But it makes sense because you're activating the CB2 receptor, which is also what the CBD does, which mitigates the high. I only threw in caryophyllene for a fun fact. This is the drug-sniffing dogs are trained to smell the caryophyllene oxide. That's what they're going for when they're sniffing your suitcase. So now we've looked at, in this entourage effect, we've looked at both the cannabinoids and the terpenes. Here is a pain product, a fabulous pain product. And look at what's in it. 1-to-1 relationship of CBD and THC, 1.5% of CBG, nice. Myrcene, I've bolded at the bottom. Almost 3.5% of myrcene, that's amazing. Balanced with a little bit of limonene, the 0.5, and 1% of beta caryophyllene. This is a pain recipe. A recreational user is not going for this product, but I love this. This makeup of this is what medicinal cannabis is all about. You can buy over-the-counter products that are not isolates. So like this, which is an entourage effect, but it's got so much THC in it. You come down to here, this is a product, healer.com. Dr. Dustin Sulak, he's a big name in cannabis, but he's also an entrepreneur, and he sells a healer line. And this is a CBD product that you can get over the counter, and there's a QR code on the box. So you can scan it and see what's in it, which is really important. Just like you're not going to buy your sushi from a gas station, don't get your CBD from a gas station. Hemp, it's coming from a hemp product, and if you don't know where the hemp product has come from, you don't want anything to do with it. He provides his analysis of it, and you can see it's got some entourage effect in there. That's page 1. Now page 2 is the terpenes. Now there's still only 0.3% weight of terpenes, but that still qualifies as not being an isolate. They didn't just pluck out the one piece and put it in a sugar cube. So now we know the products. What do we use them for? What are we going to do with this now? The patients come in. I mean, I had a patient come in the other day and say, well, I want to know how to treat my vertigo. Well, I had to tell her that's not an indication of therapy, can even make it worse. So we have to know, what are we going to treat? In the state of Maryland, we have cachexia, anorexia, wasting, severe and chronic pain, severe nausea, seizures, muscle spasms, glaucoma, PTSD. But here's the kicker. If you tried another drug and it didn't work, then it qualifies as an other condition, and now you can use cannabis. That is much like what the physicians in Virginia have. You just have to follow the code. Any diagnosed condition or disease. So a lot of discretion for your Virginia practitioners. But we still need to know, where's the evidence? So here is a 2017 National Academy of Sciences and Engineering report. You can download this report. It's almost 500 pages, and you can put it on your desktop and use your search function. So the following slides are the evidence of this cannabis. I got to take myself. I'm sorry, I had to work from my perspective to get my face out of the way so I could read this. The slides are going to describe the levels of evidence for what we find. But I'm going, and Dr. Castret touched on these too, because this is the report. But I want to put a different bent on it. So indications for therapy that are conclusive and substantial. We're not arguing over these. Chronic pain in adult, antiemetics with chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting, and improving, and I bolded this, patient-reported MS spasticity. This, pretty straight up. We don't argue over that. Now you're getting to moderate evidence. This always gets into a little muddier water because you're comparing isolates with full spectrum. So moderate evidence for improving short-term sleep outcomes. If you've got obstructive sleep apnea, or you have pain, you have some underlying issues. I do believe there is moderate evidence for sleep. Sleep is one of the main things people come to me for. Sleep and pain, big. But if you have insomnia, secondary to something cannabis treats, we have a lot of luck with sleep. But if you have insomnia because your sleep architecture has been so compromised from years of benzos and years of Ambien, and your expectation is to replace your Ambien with cannabis, I don't see much luck. The cannabis sleep is not an Ambien sleep. It's a different sleep. It's a better sleep. You still have all your sleep cycles. Some of them are altered a little, but we don't see at this point a big disturbance of sleep architecture. So I actually have mixed reviews. I agree with this on moderate evidence for sleep. And I like that these studies mostly use the whole plant extract sativas. Limited evidence for increasing appetite and decreasing weight loss. Well, the interesting thing about this is that one of the contributors to this report, a 16-member group, is Donald Abrams. You see his name a lot. He started in on the ground floor of using Marinol for HIV and AIDS for increasing their appetite. And it's his report that he got back from all of his anecdotal information was the patients are saying to him, well, I'll take this because it's legal and I can get a hold of it. But the other ones are saying, you can keep it. All I'm doing is laying around and sleeping, where if I use the plant, my appetite is better, my weight loss, I don't have as much weight loss, I'm happier, I'm up and I'm moving. And that's because they're using the totality of the plant. Improving clinician measured MS spasticity. Now, it was the patient measured MS spasticity has much better response than the clinician measured. Well, I think that's the magic of THC. One of the things THC does for pain is perception. So if the patient feels that they're getting the relief from the MS spasticity, then who are we to contradict them? You'll see this test a lot. Anxiety. They gave somebody with social anxiety disorder CBD 600 milligrams PO times 1 and said, here, go speak in public. Well, that's not why people use cannabis if they have social anxiety disorders. It's interesting, but it's not very useful. It's really just academic. It is ineffective, limited evidence that cannabis or cannabinoids are ineffective for dementia, glaucoma, and the depression related with chronic pain or multiple sclerosis. No argument for me on this page. In fact, if I had a patient come to me and want to treat glaucoma with cannabis, I wouldn't touch it. There are parts of the plant that increase intraocular pressure and parts of the plant that decrease intraocular pressure. And what's your area under the curve? I wouldn't touch a glaucoma patient. No or sufficient evidence. I've divided these in half. The top, ALS, chorea, Huntington's, Parkinson's, cancer. I have not been able to find any evidence on that. I don't even have good anecdotal evidence on that. But they also include irritable bowel syndrome, but they've only tested Marinol, and epilepsy as insufficient evidence. First, I want to address irritable bowel. I want to say that if you have a patient, especially with constipation-dominated irritable bowel, that has the terrible lower abdominal cramping, a CBD inhalant has really good feedback. Daytime use, no euphoria, kicks in seriously a matter of minutes with no constipation. Now, I know we have a lot of expensive medicines that we treat irritable bowel with, but we also have good old-fashioned inexpensive anticholinergic medicines. We have Bentyl Well, benzoyl might be okay for diarrhea dominant irritable bowel, but if you've got constipation dominant and now you're sticking an anticholinergic in the mix, not to mention the fact that you have the imbalance trying to get that dementia head, or what we call the blue pill head. But cannabis doesn't have it. The CBD piece of the cannabis, and you probably will want some myrcene in there, but as an inhalant for immediate relief, you can't argue with that. I just talked to a certifying physician the other day. She's totally changed her irritable bowel life with CBD. Epilepsy, they call it insufficient evidence. Here is little Charlotte Fiji. She just died this past year of COVID-related problems. 5 years old, Dravet syndrome, 300 grand mal seizures a week. You see her on the left. Can't walk, talk, or eat independently. Tried all the anti-seizure medications. Her parents found some other child that was treated with CBD with success, and they went on a hunt. They moved to Colorado. They found a doctor. They got together with the Stanley brothers. They created Charlotte's Web. And the little girl on the right, that's her. Now, of course, she still had seizures, but look at the difference in her quality of life. Now, GW Pharmaceuticals now has Epidiolex, which is nothing but a CBD, and it was approved in June of 2018 for the treatment of LGS and Dravet, and it is making a fortune because it costs about $35,000 a year compared to Charlotte's Web, which probably costs you $4,000 a year. And you know, a little bit of a soapbox, they tell you that they have to charge so much for their medicines because of all the research and development, but I think Charlotte Fiji's parents should get a lot of credit for that. Again, I want to reiterate, even from these tests, isolates and broad spectrum are not apples to apples. Potential drug interactions, yes, there are some. Too big a topic for today, but suffice it to say, cannabis is metabolized by the sip and all that implies. So I'll let you read these next few slides yourself because I want to talk about tolerance and dependence, which does exist. THC, not CBD, THC causes the downregulations of the CB1 receptors, and that's your tolerance. You have fewer and they're less sensitive. So when you hit your body, that you got your endocannabinoids going along life just fine, they're very reactive to when they're needed, they're on demand, and now you give them a bunch of THC, well, your body's smart, and it says, well, I have to make my own. And if you keep giving it more before you can recover, before your receptors can become fully upregulated, well, you've got a lot of tolerance. Now you're chasing the results. You're using more, and then you're using more, and then using more. Well, drug holidays are amazing to get that back under control. If you don't have a lot of tolerance, in 48 hours, you are fully upregulated. We think you're fully upregulated. If you use it for huge doses for large pain, maybe you've got to come off it for 2 weeks and then start over at half the dose. We don't see this with CBD. Dependence, on the other hand, because we are augmenting in such a large fashion our endocannabinoid system, which is by nature right time, right place, very tightly controlled. And now you're going to shotgun spray of THC. Well, your endocannabinoids just laying around with nothing to do, and it is no longer precise, right time, right place, and tightly controlled. So you do get dependent. Dosing guidelines. I love this because it was written down. I credit Dr. Dustin Sulak from healer.com, because you go into a dispensary and they're going to say things like, well, try 3 drops and then increase to 5 drops. But the products don't all have the same concentration, and so you don't really know what your dose is. This is something concrete that you can hand a patient day 1 through day 14, and it's a puzzle piece for you to get started with when people say, well, how much CBD should I use? Now, THC is a little bit trickier. How do you dose THC? It depends. It depends a lot on whether or not you are THC naive. And I even mean if you smoked as a kid in school and now you're 60, your brain remembers. It's like riding a bike. I never start them with more then between 1 to 2.5 milligrams at a time. And then I inch up piece by piece. I use the words baby step. We're going up baby step at a time, and we're going to dose into either response or side effect. And this is not such an unusual way to dose a drug. I mean, remember colchicine? Well, we don't dose colchicine like that anymore because we know better. We don't know better yet, but it stays under side effect and it stays just a response. It's microdosing. It is not one toke over the line recreational dosing. It's tiny little doses more often during the day. Keep a nice tight sine wave. Here, this is for you. It's a recipe. I took it right out of this fabulous book by Bonnie Goldstein, $30 on Amazon. And you see those top pain relief and inflammation? There's your puzzle. THC, CBD, myrcene, CBG, beta-caryophyllene. Anxiety has the linalool and the limonene. This is a really good jumping off point. People are going to ask you what's the, I'm getting low on time, so I'll have you read this yourself later. But the question of what's the difference between hemp and cannabis, because straight up saying it's THC less than 0.3%. But it's more complicated than that, because is it the fiber plant or is it the medicinal plant? Is it full spectrum? Is it just hemp? Keep in mind, we like to group everything together. PO does not equal inhalation. You take delta 9 and you metabolize it to 11-OH delta 9, which is an active metabolite, which is more potent than delta 9. And when you compare the two, inhalation versus ingestion, you have a small sliver of active metabolite with inhalation because, of course, you have avoided first pass. However, when you eat it, you have a 1-to-1. It's a different reaction to your body. Quickly, bioavailability of other methods. Tinctures, in theory, avoid first pass. They don't really, because you swallow it, you know, and everything, but it still has better bioavailability than oral. Topical effects, we get really good feedback on it, but make sure it contains CBD because it's less lipophilic, 10 times more permeable in the skin. We actually do have transdermal patches that don't have any good studies over area under the curve, but they do have a systemic effect. We hear it all the time, and people like that for airplane rides. We tell them, put it on blue skin, your wrist, your ankles, for better absorption. I see rectal suppositories having a big play in the future, especially for hospice patients, but THC alone is not absorbed directly. If you combine it with hemisuccinate, which is not available, you get really good bioavailability. Yet, lot of positive response on effects for topicals. So I'm wondering, what's the topical effect of a rectal suppository? My personal observations, you have a small but consistent group of people that get nothing from oral products. That's unfortunate. They have to go to inhalants. If possible, take all oral products. If it's any kind of a pill, hit it with a hammer and get it under your tongue. How many 40-year-old men do you have as patients on SSRIs, and what has happened to their sex life? Cannabis has got a lot of sexual enhancement and enjoyment. I think that's a valid use rather than using what's it called? Cialis. If you have a patient that's been pretty opioid tolerant, they slide right into THC much easier than other people. I have found patients are not drug seeking, they are self-medicating. And I have also found it is not for everyone, but it is a really good tool for the right patient. What do? They come into me and I listen to them. They're in a non-judgment zone. I let them talk a long time. I look at their med list. I look for drug-drug interactions, drug-disease interactions, find out what do they want. And then we suggest things to get them started. And then we guide them through the therapy until they're ready to fly around. Fabulous resources. Let's see, this Ethan Rousseau, you don't have to read his Taming THC, it's really long, but if you click on these links, you can hear a good interview with him. On the 4th dot down, understanding the endocannabinoid system. I have watched this 4 times. It's getting a little old, it's 2016, but this is a research summit filmed and put on YouTube from NIH. It's wonderful. I showed you the book for Dr. Bonnie Goldstein. This, put it on your desktop. It is put out by the government of Canada. It's 266 pages. Use your Control F function and find whatever you want. This top one, Dr. Dustin Sulak is in there, healer.com. Oh, bottom bullet, Society of Cannabis Clinicians. Click on that, it's free, and use their library. So there's your puzzle. When do you give a sativa? When do you give a hybrid? When do you give an indica? Which phytocannabinoids for which issues? Which goal the patient's trying to solve? Full spectrum versus isolate. Terpenes. Why do you use it? Therapeutic effects and benefits. How to deal with tolerance and dependence, and some pretty useful guidelines. And we're ready for Q&A.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kerr. You went through that like lightning.
No, but the problem is I could talk about this for the rest of the night, but I know I had an hour.
Yes, we have a few good questions here. How do you check terpene levels?
Well, in the state of Maryland, and I don't want to speak for Virginia, in the state of Maryland, every cannabis that comes to us has all their test results, and you ask for them. If, for example, the healer.com provides them voluntarily, you just shoot the QR code. But mostly you ask, and if you can't get an answer, don't use the product. If you get, I'm sorry, that's proprietary, or if you say, where does your hemp come from? Well, it comes from all over. Don't use that product. I've personally thrown CBD in the trash because they wouldn't tell me where it came from.
Okay. Do you have any research or knowledge about treating RSD?
RSD.
Reflex sympathetic dystrophy.
Oh, I don't. I get a lot of feedback from people who have all kinds of spastic issues, but I haven't had one patient with that. I know nothing. Sorry.
Okay. The next question is about any evidence of use for hyperemesis gravidarum, intractable, or unresponsiveness to traditional antiemetics and steroids.
We're talking about during pregnancy. So, correct. Right? That's
yes.
Where we're going.
Yep.
Pregnancy is a really gray area. Lots and lots of, and so as a pharmacist, what we say is, I'm not going to start you on cannabis, but I'm not going to take you off of it. So when you try and dig for any kind of information like that, you cannot find it. So I don't have pregnant patients. I have talked to midwives. The midwives don't take pregnant patients. So no, I don't. I'm not afraid of cannabis during pregnancy. And if I personally were pregnant and I had it, I would try it. But I have no evidence to offer you.
Okay. The next question is, may I drive when I use medical THC? May I practice medicine when I use it?
Not THC, no. CBD, yes. CBD is non-intoxicating. And if your CBD has a smidge of THC in it, you will not get euphoria from it, but you will get increased, especially pain and anxiety response. But no, you can't drive. That's enough.
What do you tell your patients who come in and start using THC for the first time about driving?
Well, there's actually, no, I don't work in the front of the house. I know that we always had them sign a piece of paper, and the piece of paper said, you can't drive. Now it might be when you apply for your card, but this is part of the rules and regulations that we have in the state of Maryland. No driving under the influence.
Okay, next question is, what's more effective for appetite stimulation, weight loss prevention, and HIV, AIDS, or cancer patients? Cannabis, oral cannabinoids, or magistral acetate?
if you stack up Marinol to the Majestrol acetate, Majestrol wins. If you stack up Cannabis to it, you don't know if it wins because those people are not up against Majestrol. But when they did the test with dronabinol, the Cannabis didn't win, Majestrol did.
Okay. How can patients in Virginia find a knowledgeable pharmacist to guide them in their decision-making on which products might be most helpful? In other words, are there going to be you in Virginia?
Well, I'm Maryland, of course, but
Right.
in Virginia, in our gleaf, we have Trey, and we have someone in Ohio, and we have a group, and we communicate with each other, and especially if somebody in Ohio or somebody in Virginia finds a patient that they have questions about or they feel is a little challenging, they will come to me. So I am always here to help the Virginia and the Ohio pharmacists, but they're pretty good. I have a lot of confidence in them, but as I said, I am also there for them as a net to help them.
Very good. There's a question about whether there's any evidence of arrhythmogenicity of cannabinoids, or is it ever a contraindication if patients have arrhythmias?
Out of all of our indications of therapy, there is nothing that I can find that Cannabis can do good for the heart. If you have uncontrolled arrhythmias, or if you have AFib that comes and goes, when you ingest THC, you have a transient increased heart rate. If I have a patient that I feel has arrhythmias as an issue with them, I get clearance from their cardiologist. And we have some cardiologists that are very involved in it. We have some that will welcome their patients using THC for their other problems, but have this whole system they've developed where first they use CBD before they give them the THC. But I don't give a patient that I feel can have cardiotoxicity anything without them going to the cardiologist first. So the answer to that is yes. Yes, there can be arrhythmia disturbances.
Are there studies done that have shown, I'm a cardiologist, by the way.
Oh, okay.
So, pertinent question. Have there been studies looking at incidence of provoking arrhythmias with this?
There is some study, gosh, I wish I had it in front of me, where within an hour after using Cannabis, that you can have some arrhythmic event. There's not a lot of them, no. We do tell people to separate their Cannabis by 2 hours from a beta blocker, just because we don't really know, but we don't want to interfere with it. But yeah, with our cardiac patients, that's tricky. And it's unfortunate because it's the same age group where now they got a lot of pain, but gosh, they've got AFib. Now when you got somebody on warfarin and you have AFib, well, I never saw any of my warfarin patients that used Cannabis have an INR that gets affected by it. But I didn't know enough at the time to ask, are you ingesting it or are you smoking it? Because if you're smoking it, by the time I get to you, your INR may have stabilized again. So if I get anybody, even on the novel oral anticoagulants, even then, because we think there might be some sort of blood thinning qualities in Cannabis, I just make sure I tell them to monitor their nose, urine, and stool for any blood like they would normally.
Okay, thank you. And our last question here is, what is your experience with sickle cell related pain? Do you have any?
I don't have any. I haven't had one sickle cell patient. I've had a lot, I'm just going to throw this out there. I have a lot of cancer patients, and sometimes they really believe that they're going to cure their cancer with Cannabis. And it's a tough situation because you don't want to throw cold water on anybody's hope. I refer them to the American Cancer Society website and their statement on cannabis, and then I guide them with their therapy, hoping to at least relieve some of their pain and anxiety, etc. But I can't support their claims that they're going to cure their cancer. My last patient, stage 4 brain cancer, he's in hospice, and he and his wife are sure they're going to cure his cancer. Those are tough situations dealing with those patients.
Well, with that note,
And there's actually one more question, if I may interrupt, I'm sorry, in the chat section, which asks, as a pharmacist, how do you see the role of cannabinoids in the care of post-op pain? It seems opioids are becoming much harder and probably not as good to use. Do you see these drugs as having a way to help there? If so, how would you recommend they be prescribed? Edibles, inhalation, dosing? This is a difficult question, I know. Thanks for taking it on.
It's a big question. And yes, you know, opioids are just not for all pain. One of the best things about opioids, you know, is after a while, they help people's psychic pain. But the cannabinoids have two different roles for the pain, an inhalant versus an ingestion. So post-operative pain, they're in pain now. They don't want to be taking ingesting a gummy or something like that kicks in possibly in 2 hours. They want something that's going to kick in 10 seconds. So what would the place be for a pain medicine that you're inhaling in a post-op? Now you can vape flower, which puts off virtually zero smoke and zero smell, but you have to have your own device. I don't see them, working in a hospital all these years, I kind of don't see them taking that on, but I could see sneaking it into the person's room, especially if it's a vape and there's no odor, because that's immediate relief. And the endocannabinoid system is suffering after surgery. You know, the endocannabinoid system is this huge, awesome system that goes out and touches so many receptors. I mean, your 5-HT, your PPAR, it helps with your TRPV. I mean, it's out there touching everything. And to me, post-op pain, yeah. And the THC is going to make you kind of not care that you're in all this pain.
okay.
So
Well,
I know that I was at rapid speed because I know that these, you know, they have an hour, and I don't want to take up more than the hour. But if any of your physicians have any questions, please feel free to email me at dr.helen@gleaf.com, and we can put that in the chat. Where? Nope, I'm not in the chat. All right, I'm going to put it in the chat.
And I can send it in our follow-up email to our registrants so that they have it in an email.
Yes, I'm always there, and I answer my emails, you know, how you all do, pretty much all the time. And if nothing else, I can get you in touch with some good references.
that's great. Thank you so much. Very informative. And I'm sure we're just going to have more and more questions as this becomes available here in Virginia.
It was a real pleasure. It is my favorite topic.
Thanks so much. And thanks to all the members for joining us. And we hope we see you at another RAM event very soon. Good night.
Good night.
Be well.